Okay, we are live and welcome to the day 7 of the Conference of Parties, otherwise known as COP29. And today's theme is human capital, children and youth, health and education. We're here today with Dana Freling, Matthew Hill, John Capece, and Rock with a last name that I don't know how to pronounce. So, but you might remember him from last year, our broadcast. So, Dana, how was today?
Today was really interesting, not necessarily that uplifting, but it was packed full of sessions and interesting people and new information. I have learned a lot.
Hey, Matthew, how was today for you? What did you do?
Yeah, I definitely like to second what Dana said. I heard some really impactful stuff. I've met some wonderful people, some youth representatives, some just wildly smart scientists who tried to explain their research to me, and I was like, all right, I'll go look that up and see if I can like Wikipedia it. So some very empowering stuff to hear, but at the same time, frustrating updates from the high level events that are going on. Definitely a mix of emotions to see some wonderful people putting in a lot of work, and to hear people in my age group that get to stand up and speak for themselves, but
Great.
not always be as heard as we might like them to be.
Yeah, that's really great that young people were able to speak. Because you're right, their voices aren't always heard. Or if it's heard, sometimes it's heard as petulant and not actually knowledgeable or important to know. So that's really great. Rock, how's your day been going today, day 7 of COP29?
Thank you, Angela. It's good to be back on the broadcast again. Just a quick note on what was just said. The United Nations has done a historically great job at least making it look like they offer a place for youth delegates to attend these high-level conferences. Oftentimes, there are youth negotiators that actually are licensed or officially promoted by the United Nations in attendance at these events. However, many of the times you'll actually notice those same names that have often appeared in the past as the youth negotiators are often those who will use that same ladder to climb up through the United Nations ranks, and often are using some of those positions or for their own personal benefit. Today, as you mentioned a moment ago, was human development, children, youth, and health education. And on that front, I noticed a couple of really interesting sessions, one called the Baku Initiative on Human Development for Climate Resilience. And the idea of this of that lecture, that seminar, was there needs to be an aim at addressing the link between human development and climate resilience. Oftentimes, where there are higher standards for human, the HDI, the Human Development Index, there often will be a very interesting correlation between those who are resilient or live in resilient communities against the climate crisis, and those who are at most at risk for climate disasters are often those who are on the lower end of the Human Development Index, and so on. So that was really interesting to see a lot of scientists and advocates show up and essentially make that point, or at least plot that on the graph. I also noticed there was a couple of sessions on eco-literacy. So I think this is a more in general focus towards those on the right, or those who have a lot of climate disinformation, or even those who live in communities where there's a lot of climate disinformation. So how do you approach those who either have no reason to believe that they should act upon the climate crisis? So it's basically just an environmental awareness across any sort of educational level. So if you're at the higher upper echelons, if you're the PhD focused groups, the approach was to try to tone down and use a lot less, as we say in the academic community, a lot less garble, and try to speak more to the lower, just to someone who may not understand that sort of high level or the language at a PhD level. And those who are at the very bottom, who's only mostly those who are children and those who are growing up, how to not to speak too much out of your mouth, not to say too much that you don't know. Always speak what you do know within reason, and so on.
Rock, was this session recorded? Is there anywhere someone could watch that? Because I think that's a really important thing.
I imagine I really do hope that these sessions are recorded. I don't know. I will have to take a look though. I do know that quite a few sessions, unfortunately, are not being recorded here at the
Mm.
UN, which is at least for posterity's sake, it's a very depressing thought. But yeah, I'll try to see if there are places online where these recordings are stored.
Yeah, I think that
I think
being
we
able
could-
to talk about climate change like a normal person is very important, and that we have, I am not even so sure that it's completely denial. I think it's just really a lack of information about the fact that the climate is changing. And that I found out from talking to somebody who works in the climate space in the US, that there are people that aren't even, because states don't recycle there, not automatically like they do in some other countries, that people don't even know what recycling is. And so, which is sad, but we have to get down to the basics for people. Dana, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to what Rock's very important comment about um, bringing voices to the table and the value of this human capital. I attended a session on gender responsive finance, and where this is part of the gender constituency. They're trying to draft a statement, and it was really discouraging to hear how this is included in language, but nothing is really being accomplished, and they don't expect much from the results from this Article 6.2 in terms of financing. Similarly, I attended two different sessions on addressing the needs of Indigenous people and their role in providing solutions and being guardians of our waters and forests and lands. One was tribal nations from around the world were drafting their final language to go to be submitted for consideration. It was so interesting to be in the room with Indigenous people from everywhere from Greenland to the Amazon forest. I attended a session with the US Center with representatives from the tribal nations discussing their challenges and solutions and how they have actually benefited from policies from the Biden administration under the Inflation Reduction Act. And there was as well a representative from the FDA, from the Federal Department of Agriculture. No, not FDA, from the Federal Department of Agriculture, discussing the delegation of tribal lands and within national parks and reallocating access and dominion over these lands and resources to the tribal nations. So a lot of progress is being made in the United States, but they're hoping to conclude it so that it's not infringed upon with the new administration. But it's interesting to see how at the global level within the United Nations framework, it does appear to be a lot of lip service to the needs of women, to the needs of marginalized people, to the needs of Indigenous people.
Okay, John. Oh, Matthew, you wanted to say something. Please go ahead.
Yeah, just for a minute. I would, yeah, definitely what Dana just said about there being kind of lip service to people's needs. I think that's definitely an overarching, theme here. But to discuss what Rock mentioned about some ladder climbing folks a little bit, that's definitely very present, and it kind of adds to the frustration because you hope that when people and in younger age groups are given voices that they'll actually be able to finally we discussed the other night how climate change is happening now, but it is also going to affect our futures a lot. So you would hope that people would actually be fighting for the futures we're going to inherit, but often that's not the case. But that doesn't mean there aren't some young people doing some really great things. I spoke to someone today at a youth networking session who is like a master's or PhD student in precision agriculture, and he tried to explain that to me and how he uses like remote sensing and data science, and that's what I meant by like science I need to like find a Wikipedia page for or something. And he's actually getting to speak at a panel tomorrow, and so it's someone just a couple years older than me, getting to actually speak at a panel at the UN to talk about the science that he's doing, which is awesome. And you know the panel's going to be in French, so I won't be attending because I'm a silly monolingual American. But it's wonderful to see, you know, just other university students are speaking at panels talking about the research they're doing. Um, at another panel I went to about it was themed around kind of equalizing voices in climate discussions and negotiations, and I spoke with one or two youth negotiators, I think is their title, and it was quite difficult to get a response out of them of what it was they were even doing at this conference, what their work could look like, things they'd accomplished other than just that they were here, that they were present. And so I was trying to get a real answer of like, well, what have you done? What has it been like to participate in the negotiations? And it was very difficult to get a straight answer. It was difficult to find out really what the value was there. And the overall sense was not of someone who was looking to uplift more youth voices, you know, as much as their own young voice, which I suppose is a form of progress that, you know, there are young voices, but you would hope that they were, you know, very representative, very, you know, as someone with a vested interest in whether the world's going to keep being livable, you know, you would hope that it would be focused around the science and focused around, you know, a more democratized, you know, representativeness. But that's not always the case, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, but you know
Um,
what? I think that the fact that there's youth there, even if they don't have they can't define their roles, they will know how to handle this in the future. They will know when they see something. They will know what to do at a conference like this, just having been there. I know that that's like kind of a small thing, but sometimes the thing that keeps people from doing stuff is their lack of experience. And so giving them this experience when they are older adults, then will not even that much older, just a little bit older, once they've got through their schooling, it'll make a big difference in their lives, I'm sure, or our lives, let's hope. Dana, one last
I
thing.
did attend a session on youth engagement and dying coral reefs and oceanography. And it was attended by youth engagement officers, youth scientists, and NOAA, the National Oceanic and
Atmospheric
Agency. And it was very interesting discussing the aims of NOAA to engage youth. They have actually gone into high schools. Every quarter they engage 16 interns to come in and work with NOAA. And they were talking about, yes, we need for youth to become scientists, but we also need to connect the science to the policy. And we need to have them at the table with the science and as a part of the decision-making for the solutions. And what was most unique and pivotal about the youth engagement is that they bring an enthusiasm and they bring a capacity to communicate to the broader community through social media, through other platforms, the message which is necessary to educate the public.
Oh, that's really great. Yeah, John, I just got caught up with everybody else. How are you today and what's going on? What have you seen or heard today?
Well, I'd actually like to comment on some of the observations made by Matthew, Rock, and Dana on this youth dimension. Campus Climate Corps, that's what we're about, is providing youth the experiences so that they're better prepared as they're further along in their careers to really contribute to solutions, both on a technical and a policy level and an organizational level. And what you point out is absolutely true about these young people, sometimes they don't know what to do or what they should be doing here, but they're here observing. That's very important. However, equally critical are the values that they bring into that role of observation and development. So it's extremely important to select young people with the right set of values so that they are bringing a shared objective, a shared set of goals to their participation in events like COP, and not simply the ladder climbing. And I'm not sure that I've seen a lot of success in that selection process over the years, which is why in interacting with folks like Matthew and Rock and other young people, I stress the values as much as the technical experience. And Dana, what you talked about the internships. 2 years ago, we had Esteban, a PhD student, participating in this activity, and he contributed some wonderful coverage over the 2 weeks of COP. And he used this experience as a credential to secure a fellowship to serve in a congressional office. Forget her name, Congresswoman in California, who's the climate leader. And he's been doing amazing work up in DC on that front. So bringing young people into this process is very important. And the U.S. Center had a youth session this afternoon and tried to send some of our folks there. We had another student from the University of Florida, PhD student, girl from Nigeria, studying chemical engineering. So she participated in that. And we're also, I wrote up a session proposal today for a conference at University of Florida, where Rock and Matthew and this woman, Shalom, can help communicate that to the university audience, their experience here at COP29. Also, one of the tangible contribution by youth participant, Rock, you remember Marie Claire? And she, I think, what is she, from Switzerland, I think? And she is a signatory onto an open letter that's calling for some fairly dramatic changes in the COP process, signed by about 22 people. And hers was the name I recognized as a youth voice on that letter. There were some very senior people, former UN Secretary Generals and others, but she was on that list. So somebody who starts in this process young can go on to participate and make some meaningful contributions, even if it's criticizing the process as much as contributing to it.
It's really a credit to you, John, who has been doing this for many years and bringing in and educating and inspiring so many young people from the United States in this COP process. And we have one great example on our screen today. And I just have to make a shout out to the courageous and extraordinary efforts of Rock, who is quite a young man, who just ran for Congress as the Democratic candidate from Florida's, which district, Rock?
Congressional District 12 over on the Nature Coast.
Bravo to you, and a big thanks and shout out to John for all the guidance that he has given to Rock and Matthew and dozens of young people for many years in drawing them into this COP process and the environmental issues and climate issues that are facing us today.
In running this campaign, Matthew and Rock stressed the climate issue. And Matthew, Rock, maybe you can talk a little bit about that, how you integrated the climate issue into your campaign and what your objectives were and what they might be politically going forward relative to candidacy and climate.
The most important, I think, element of a campaign centered on the climate crisis is the messaging. It's how you outreach to voters. It's how you approach folks who, on a most, I think actually the folks I've just bumped into the least on the campaign trail, interestingly enough, we're not climate deniers. A lot of folks on the right, I think, are coming around to the fact that the climate crisis is not just real, but it is also man-made. And a lot of the messaging in my campaign wasn't towards those who denied the climate crisis then. It was about linking sensible economic policy with addressing the climate crisis together and then engaging and sometimes even approaching it like a grad student would. Every single person you interact with is a little case study in how best to communicate the fact that the climate crisis can be solved with sensible economic policy. But the longer that we wait, in other words, action today is a lot more cheap than action tomorrow. So communicating with those voters of different wavelengths was key to how we approached that during the campaign on the campaign trail. Although I will admit that most of the actual messaging that was received by others during the campaign trail was just other young people. A lot of folks who were the older ones who were on board with what we were doing, those are typically folks out in New York and California, older retirees that just wanted someone younger who was out there, going out to bat for the climate crisis. But the actual folks who were helping with, registering to make phone calls, phone banking, going out there canvassing door to door, those are all young people. I don't think I had a single person on my campaign who was younger than 25 or older than 25, which
Wow.
I think goes to stress just how I think important a lot of young folks saw a climate campaign was important to their futures and their lives.
Yeah, that's really great. Yeah, I have to say, I have to go along with Dana and commend you for running for election. And I hope you'll do it again. As a Florida voter, I unfortunately don't vote in your district. I appreciate when people are out there striking a blow for the climate, because Florida is going to be in big trouble if something isn't done soon.
It'll take quite a few years before I consider running for office again, but maybe the stress of a PhD will bounce me back into politics at some point in the future.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I suspect it'll take 2 years.
Yeah, I was just about to say, you have 2 years. So actually, you have a year because you need to start early. So yeah, just get it in your head because we need you. We definitely need you in Congress. That would be awesome. What else happened today? Matthew, what other interesting things did you see today? What was important for you?
Yeah, so two things come to mind. One of them, something more very directly for me that had a lot of value. I mentioned it earlier. There was like a youth networking event, and that's where I met that precision agriculture person who's doing a panel tomorrow. And while it wasn't directly relevant to all the rest of COP, we weren't necessarily talking about the negotiations and stuff going on. I think for one, it definitely gave me a perspective of just how many young people are present, which is really wonderful to see. And it was specifically it was at the U.S. Center, so it was mostly young people from the U.S. So that definitely made me feel at home. There are a lot of people in the same situation as me, of like, oh, I'm young. This is my first COP. A lot of new experiences going on. And so it was really a good community event that there's a lot of people that are on the same page here. So that was really a wonderful experience, and I think it's very good that things like that are organized because as it's very clear to see from Rock's campaign and just in general, young people care about the climate. It's just a fact of life. That's something that's important to us. We have a vested interest in it, and so it's good to see that. There's so many people who are acting on that care for the climate. It's not just a mental thing. There's action behind it. But to kind of flip the script a little bit, something a statement that was released today, called the Baku Initiative on Human Development for Climate Resilience. It's in keeping with the theme for today on human development and children and youth and things like that. And on a slightly less positive note than me getting to meet a bunch of young people at this conference, the joint statement is great. I'd encourage anyone to go read it again. It's called the Baku Initiative on Human Development. And it's really cool. And it's signed by a bunch of people. And it talks a lot about I'll read part of it. Our collective commitment to advancing human development as a cornerstone of climate resilience, pledged to work together. Some really beautiful language there, signed by banks and some other agencies and stuff. And there's not a single hard number, not a single commitment to do anything, not a single, list of donations that will be made, of finance that will be provided. So much just, beautiful purple prose of like, oh, we're going to work together and this is so important and we're going to get out and solve it. And it seems wonderful. And it's like, oh, amazing. Like, so many banks signed this. Surely they're going to do something. But there was nothing committal in there. Not a line that said we will definitively do this. Not a line of financing. We will contribute this much money. And that's kind of been the vibe of this COP, of these statements that seem so wonderful and promise these great things, but don't actually commit to anything solid, anything concrete. So it makes it difficult. It makes it a little bit frustrating. And if you're like me, and some people in your family are like, "Oh, politics is all politics doesn't mean anything. There's no value for it," and then I have to call them up and be like, "Well, you're a little bit right, but there's still value in these conferences." It makes it difficult. It makes it frustrating to see so much effort and time being put into statements that don't mean anything. So there's a lot of great stuff going on. I saw a lot of great stuff today. I personally, I got like a million people's LinkedIn's, which is a new experience for me. But I guess that's what you do at a business conference like this. So some really great things going on, but not enough, and not enough action from the people that we need the action from. Um, and I was reading, there was a study a couple months ago about how like most billionaires within, I think it was like an hour or 2 hours, will produce more carbon emissions than a lot of people do in their lifetimes. It's like, as much effort as we put into this, as much as I work and study on this, as much as we put climate into campaigns and stuff, there's only so much that we can do without some drastic change from the richest people, from the governments and things like that. So it's interesting to be on the ground where people are promising change but not working towards it.
Dana?
Yeah, on that note, I did attend one session where I felt like there was some reporting on very positive change in investment that has taken place. So I just want to, follow that up. And I'm really anxious to get Rock's input on it, because he is a regenerative agriculture specialist, or will be. And this was a session on empowering climate action through agricultural innovation. And it was the U.S. Secretary of Agriculture, Thomas J. Vilsack, who attended and began reporting to us. It was within the UAE pavilion on since COP26, that's the COP that was in Glasgow, where they started off with very little. They made an agreement, and now there are 800 partners and 56 governments signed up to supporting the initiative called AIM, and with investing into smart agricultural systems and food systems. And now last year at COP28 was the first year that food systems and agriculture was actually made a thematic day. They understood that this is so pivotal to solving our climate crisis. How do we feed the world? And now they went from 4 billion in investment to 22 billion in investment, with lots of these so-called sprints, these different initiatives moving forward. I don't know that much about the nuts and bolts, but I have a clip here, and I would love to hear what Rock has to say. Angela,
All right. Yeah, I have the clip of Tom Vilsack. That's who it is. All right, here we go, everybody.
The partnership of Aim for Climate is government partners with the private sector, nonprofit sector, knowledge partners who basically bring information and technical assistance, and then there are the folks who are investing in innovation. And we were hopeful that we would see additional innovation sprints coming into this COP. I frankly was surprised when our team told me that we had an increase of 56 additional sprints since last year, which brings to a total of 129 sprints. So when we started, we had just a handful of sprints. Now there are 129 opportunities for us to learn. We focused these sprints in 4 critical areas. We clearly wanted to make sure that smallholder farms benefited from these innovations. So many of the sprints are focused on providing technical assistance, tools, ways in which smallholders can take full advantage of knowledge and information about weather, for example, to decide when and under what circumstances to plant. We were obviously deeply concerned about the research component of this, focusing on regenerative practices and learning a little bit more about agricultural research. We wanted to make sure that we did a focus on emerging technologies. You've mentioned several of them. We're announcing a number of these sprints at this COP, doing amazing things, creating fertilizer in a way that doesn't add to the carbon footprint of agriculture. It's remarkable. And if you have an opportunity to take a tour of the UAE exhibit here, you're going to see some pretty amazing innovation that's taking place at the UAE. And then finally, we all know that methane is a problem and a challenge. And many of these sprints are dedicated to reducing methane. So 129 opportunities. And what's terrific about this is that it doesn't stop when Aim for Climate ends in 2025. This is a 5-year commitment that we made. But as a result of the establishment of Aim for Scale, many of these innovations will be taken to the next level, which is really the way in which Aim for Climate will continue, even though it's a 5-year enterprise. So a really exciting time, and some of you already have a copy of this in hand. Much of the information that we're sharing with you today is outlined in this report that documents the progress that's been made.
And I wanted to just add that he said that our ability to decarbonize agriculture will come much more rapidly than our ability to decarbonize the, for instance, transport industry. So it is looking more hopeful, but I would love to hear what Rock has to say about all of this.
Thank you, Dana. It was a well-recorded video. I'm just sorry I wasn't there. I was actually attending a session by some folks that were talking about how to talk to folks that have preconceived notions about nuclear. Anyway, subject for a different time. So when it comes to agricultural emissions, I think a lot of folks, especially if you're, even if you're someone on the outside looking in, you know that agriculture contributes significantly to the overall massive carbon budget that we've got. I think close to 24% of all carbon emissions in the world are related to agriculture. So when it comes to regenerative agriculture, which was the subject of my master's thesis, we have a number of steps that it proposes we can take in order to reduce our overall budget. And I think it's really interesting and also key that Vilsack's closing statement, I think you had mentioned, was on how much faster it will be to decarbonize agriculture as compared to other industries. And there's a number of reasons for that. But going back to how agriculture in general can be reduced, mostly through some, we call carbon sequestration. So regenerative agriculture has, or its promise is in carbon sequestration. So how do we retain as much carbon as possible in the soils when we are conducting our agricultural business? So as long as the soil can absorb and hold the carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, that helps mitigate climate change, because that means that carbon's not going up into the atmosphere, helping to trap greenhouse gases. Now, an important stride made at Glasgow was this reduction of methane. In fact, they've called the COP that was held in Glasgow the methane COP, reducing our methane emissions by 30% by 2030, I think was the promise. when it comes to agriculture, this is extremely important, not only because of the types of food that we grow, but also, as many of you might know, cattle have a massive, produce a massive amount of methane. Now, methane traps heat or traps heat about 30 times more than the carbon. Like a single molecule of methane traps about 30 times more heat than a single molecule of carbon. So methane is a lot more dangerous. Luckily, we don't produce as much methane as we do carbon, but that still doesn't mean that we shouldn't be making strides when it comes to these. And that means that we have to work on how, what kind of food that we grow. Do we consider eating beef? Do we consider eating other foods and sources and so on? Anyway, to continue, agriculture, or at least regenerative agriculture, also leads to lower nitrous oxide emissions. Our reliance on nitrogen as a fertilizer, with potential for the utilization of things like legume rotations and organic fertilizers, can reduce how much leaching of nutrients that happens when we use a lot of nitrogen inside the soils. Regenerative agriculture also deals with biodiversity. So what types of animals do we have grazing on fields? Also, how can we build up resilience against pests and diseases? Regenerative agriculture also deals with improved water retention, also with soil erosion. So a lot of times when we farm intensely in particular pieces of land, we can we put the soil at risk for erosion, which means that soil just no longer exists in that same place. Now, I think as Dana, you had mentioned at the closing of Vilsack's speech there, was this idea that agriculture is one of those industries which it will be a lot easier to decarbonize than others. And the key fact of the matter is it's because of the significant amount of investments, financial investments that we've invested into it, that really do show that decrease in emissions can be very stark and be very fast. And that's where I think that his sprints, the sprint initiatives, those are very key. And hopefully, I don't see the data proposing this at the moment until we've adopted regenerative agriculture across an entire wide range, until we've scaled it appropriately. It is unlikely that we're going to see a massive steep decrease in agricultural emissions. But hopefully this will be something that we'll be dealing with around the corner as these initiatives continue to gain funding and continue to gain steam.
I might like to add to some of that. I've been dealing with the water quality issues in agriculture since the 1980s, and that very quickly morphed into the climate dimensions. And agriculture has been dragging its feet intentionally for decades in cleaning up its act relative to the nitrogen and phosphorus. It might be different relative to the carbon, but I think that will only be the case if significant incentives are put forward. The technology helps because the technology, with the cost of it dropping so dramatically, represents a cost savings to the farmers by precision agriculture, allowing them to use less fertilizers, less pesticides, etc. So that's a tangible economic benefit to the farmers that works out fairly easily for them. But I'm not so sure. For example, in regenerative agriculture, the primary feature is no-till, reducing the plowing of the fields to retain that carbon in the soil. And the United States has been lagging behind. I mean, it's lagging behind Canada. Canada is doing much better on no-till farming than the United States. And combined, the United States, Canada, and Mexico, we're way behind South America. South Americans are adopting these processes. So, our Secretary of Agriculture may espouse some lofty ambitions, and I'd love to see those realized, but the evidence isn't there yet. The ambitions are, but the evidence is not.
Yeah, we have a lot of work to do in all areas, but farming is definitely one that that needs a lot of help, for sure, whether they want it or not. I mean, it's for me, one of the things, farming is super important for all of us, even though we don't really see it most of the time, depending on where you live. but how things are farmed and what is being farmed, and the fact that maybe you can even keep the crops in the ground because a storm isn't coming and ripping them all out. That was something that actually happened in Germany this year, that last year, that we had a few bad storms that destroyed crops. And so you can only have so many crops destroyed before people start to starve. Let's switch gears for a moment and see what Michal Fidler was up to today. We have some more great photos and commentary from him, and then we'll come back and close out.
And I'll be starting my photo presentation today, as usually, on a bus, on the shuttle bus from metro station to COP's blue zone, because you meet on the bus every time there is someone interesting. Like I said yesterday, I traveled with the Taliban guys. The day before, I traveled with the Israeli delegation, and today I noticed the gentleman on the left-hand side with the red hat. And I thought that I have seen that hat before, so I had a look, and then I realized, of course, I know this gentleman. His name is Fadel Wadeh, and he's a waterkeeper from Senegal. And maybe 2, 3, 4 years ago, we attended the COP together we did these streams with Waterkeeper Alliance, and Fadel was one of our guests. So then I remembered I actually shot some videos of him previously. So that was a nice little meeting with him. And by the way, when I went from COP back on the shuttle bus tonight, I sat together with a gentleman from Fiji, and he definitely was a rugby player, because I hardly could sit next to him. He was so white. So every single trip on a bus from COP or to COP is a little adventure, because you always experience something new. Now, when I entered COP, first I went to these little booths, which are just behind the main entrance, and I walked around, and I realized that this year the booths are organized in specific sections, while in the previous years, as far as I remember, they were all mixed up together. So this year it's a little more organized. I walk and talk with few of the booths participants, or the people who were stuffing them, and what surprised me that there were 2 or 3 related to the nuclear energy. So nuclear energy is definitely a topic at this COP. But it was Saturday, and it was Saturday morning, and I asked the staff there, and they said it was very slow this morning, and they expected that it was going to be very slow the whole day. So I did not spend there that much time, and moved on. And as I walked through the corridors, I ran into the Senator Markey, but I'll get back to him a little later, since I had, I had met him before, and I met him today a few more times later on. I walked to the pavilions, and today, as was already mentioned, was the Science, Technology and Innovation Day. So I was very curious what was going on, and where else to start it, what pavilion such a day than in Science for Climate Action Pavilion. And I have to say that the presentation I attended, the first one, that started at 11 o'clock, was probably the best one I have seen so far during the whole COP. The panel was, there were maybe five or six panelists, all of them scientists, very highly educated. And I sat there for full 90 minutes and just could not stop listening, because it was so interesting. So I just wrote down a few of the topics that they discussed, and that was really something. So the topic was related to the land use changes or emissions created by land use changes, and which part is anthropogenic and which is not. And it was kind of complex. But what seems to me the take home message for me was that they discussed the various difficulties with the data collection, and how the methodology should be defined. In some countries, forest is considered this. In other countries, forest is considered that. So they have difficulties with the methodology. They also openly admitted that the data they work with and the results they provide are not perfect, but they work with various ranges because they simply cannot provide specific and concrete data because that data is not available. Yeah, well, they admitted that they might be making mistakes. So compare that to any of the politicians who are at COP. That was very amazing. I also wrote a note, a quote what they mentioned. Let me just find it, and it goes as: "We are dynamic as scientists, so is carbon. While on the policy level, the processes are so much slower, where everyone has to agree to every little thing." And they didn't say, but it was obvious that they were kind of frustrated. And they also mentioned that they prepare these scientific reports, and then the policymakers, they just like the status quo. They don't really want to change anything, and it's so difficult to, these scientists spend so much time and so much effort on preparing these reports, and then the policymakers, they want just very simple results that they can understand. So they were also discussing that they need to prepare better and more understandable report, so people who don't have these high university degrees can also understand that. And the very last note about this specific presentation was I just realized that land use is just one subtopic from the assessment report that the IPCC prepares. And when I saw how much effort is put in just into this single in this subtopic, then it's amazing how much work is being done to prepare the whole AR report. But then that was this pavilion, and it was actually one of the highlights of the day. Then I walked around a few of the other pavilions, and I was surprised that there was nobody in the European Union pavilion. I walked there 3 or 4 times, and it was empty all the time. So there was just a big screen with Ursula von der Leyen in a looped video. It was played over and over. Not sure why that happened, but that was what it was today. And here is another highlight of today. That's the it's Indonesian pavilion. Sorry, it's an Indonesian pavilion. I saw that they had these desk there, and they have these circles, the green circles, and I did not really understand how that works. So I let the gentleman explain it to me, and he said that they got an inspiration in the Iron Man movie. The technology is similar to what you can see in the Iron Man. So I have never seen Iron Man, so I did not really understand it at first. But basically, you take these circles, you put them on this desk, or they call it smart desk, and then you basically just move around, and it brings up various images and videos. So you work on with that smart screen, and it's not very difficult once you have the technology in place. Then putting there the various content is pretty simple. That's what they explained it, how they explained it to me. That was definitely a highlight of my day, because I felt kind of like in an Iron Man movie. Given the technology and innovation days, there were some 360 videos of the virtual reality. We have seen it many times before, so nothing really that new to me. But these are images from the Togo pavilion, and I'm pretty sure that these girls or the ladies were using it for the first time, because you can see it in their faces how amazed they were that they experienced something in the virtual reality. Not all pavilions were as busy like those I have shown so far. This one is Ghana, and I think the only innovation they had there was that the black box on the left-hand side. It's some sort of a booster, and it seemed like they were playing karaoke there. There was nothing going on. So the innovation was probably a karaoke at COP. I'm sorry for this gentleman. I just couldn't help it. I had to take one more image here over his shoulder, because he was just preparing some presentation last minute. So the innovation he was using was just copy paste. But I felt really bad, so moved on and went to the Portuguese pavilion. And when I saw the expression of the gentleman on the right-hand side, I knew something was amazing. Something amazing was going to happen. So what in the Portuguese pavilion, they had this surf, if you would, the surfboard, and you could basically virtually surf there. So you could, as it says, immerse yourself in the giant wave of ocean protection. There were not so many people waiting there in the queue, so I waited for this Azerbaijani lady to experience it. So she stepped on the surfboard. She got the 3D glasses, also some sound, and they placed also the fan in front of her, so the experience would be not just 3D, it would be probably 4D. And then she surfed around, and when she's finished, I think it was worth it. She looked like she has the greatest time ever, because there were simply she definitely enjoyed that. I moved right next to this Portuguese pavilion was this Chinese pavilion. There was some Chinese technologies, and some of it looked like I did not even know what it was. So I asked the staff there, and the thing on the right-hand side, the bluish thing, it's actually a modem, which is portable, and it should work in about 170 countries of the world, and it's also a power bank. So the Chinese gentleman asked me if how do I get connected? How do I get online here? So I explained him I bought a local SIM card, and he explained to me that that was not necessary. If I had this tool from them, it would work here. So immediately he asked me that I get connected through his modem. It worked, and I don't know whether if I get a spyware in my phone or not, but it worked. So I will definitely check this technology because that seems like something very handy to have a modem with you like that. He wanted to have a selfie, so I took a selfie with him as well. But very, very interesting stuff there. And one more thing, one more pavilion is the Thailand pavilion. They do not really attract people or invite people on innovations, or that's what I saw. But they just use in Thailand. There is this baby. I don't even know how to pronounce it. The baby hippopotamus or baby hippo in one of the Thailand zoos. And here there is a copy from porcelain copy. The name of the baby hippo is Mudeng, and you can take an image and actually a photo there, and there was hundreds of images of various participants with this baby hippo. So I don't know if it's a new technology, but it's definitely an innovation how to invite people in. So after these and maybe few more pavilions, I went to the Kyrgyz one, where they have this traditional yurta, and sat there. That's the traditional house that the herders use, and sat there for a minute, but it was too busy. So I walked to the Uzbek pavilion, just wanted to sit down in their tea house alone and have a few minutes of being alone, but I was immediately approached by this Azerbaijani girl, and she wanted to have selfies with me. I don't really know what for reason, because she didn't speak any language that I could understand, but we ended up that selfie is the same word in English and Russian and Azerbaijani, so selfie is probably a very international word. So selfie at the end of the day in the pavilions. But I thought enough in the pavilions, and I moved to the plenaries because I thought, well, let's check just the plenaries. And I was surprised, there was not much going on there. Actually, there were no official meetings. There was this demonstration. So today, the demonstrants, there were none in the corridors, but they went to the plenary, to the smaller plenary. The plenary is very large, and the protesters could use probably 10% of the space, and the rest was closed for them. So there was few hundred of them, but they definitely could not use the whole space, and there was a lot of security there, and you could not just leave that specific space. These are just some images from the protests. It seems like the small little protests we have seen in the previous days. All these small groups just gathered together in this plenary today, and they were there all together. I believe this is the last image from the group protest, but nothing new comparing to the previous protests during the previous days. Just few more images when the protest in the plenary ended, then the protesters moved in front of the plenary, but that was about it. And at the end of the day, I walked to the US Center or to the US Pavilion and saw there that there was the big crowd, and obviously I knew what was the reason for that, because there were the two US senators, so it would be the Senator Markey and Senator Whitehouse. They are probably the champions on the climate change issues in the US, and the crowd was pretty large. So I took few images there. I could not really listen. I did not listen. I'm sorry, because when I take images, I just, my mind goes blank. And I just take images. So I don't really know that much what they talked about. Maybe we can discuss it later. But I just took images. And when I went to check if the images were okay, I stepped out of the room, and I just looked to the right-hand side, and I saw that there was the UN security guy. So that's the guy on the right. In the middle, there is an American lady. She's the staff of the US Pavilion. And the gentleman on the left-hand side, he's from the Russian Federation. So they had there some talk, they discussed. I did not want to listen to them. I know what they talked about, but that would not be polite to mention it. But it was kind of an international experience that Russia and the US, they got together and talked together. And I believe this would be the last image of the day, since on the previous day, the hero of our show was John, being on the Uzbek national television. I believe the hero for tonight is the youngest member of our team, so Matthew, who met together with Senator Markey. I think when looking in Matthew's face that he had a good time and enjoyed meeting Senator. That would be from me all for the images. I hope I met your standards, and with this being said, I'm turning back to you.
Wow. Matthew, look at you. Well, that's very impressive.
It was wonderful. The two senators gave just an incredible panel the other day, and it was truly great to see Senator Markey. I really wish that I would have been able to, just talk to him for like hours on end. We only got to chat for a minute, but it was so wonderful to meet him. Seriously, just two wonderful gentlemen.
Awesome. That's really awesome. All right. We are coming to the end of our broadcast. Just to let everybody know, we'll be back on Wednesday. Let's go around to everybody and see what your final comments are about today's COP. John, do you want to chime in?
Well, I'm always struck by the discussion of research, because they're talking about some of the research to reconcile the modeling of emissions and the national commitments. And really, a lot of this is kind of meaningless until we see the big scale carbon dioxide numbers begin to decrease. Once they start decreasing, how fast they decrease and how we can optimize their reduction become important. But right now, that number is still rising. So optimizing reductions is just theoretical.
Yes, you're absolutely right. Rock, what are your closing comments?
I'm actually very proud to have seen Matthew getting in the middle of all of this, actually, too. Who would have thought that coming and introducing yourself at a college Dems event would have a couple months later ended up here. So anyway, very proud of what you're doing, and the folks that you're meeting here, and the work that you're doing with all these broadcasts. I just want to say, for my closing remarks, it's going to be a rocky ride for the next couple of days, or next 4 days, as the conference will likely peter out. We'll see the actual developments from this, because next year, for those of you who are familiar with the COP process, is the next required NDC's updates by each individual country. So seeing this conference as it begins to wind down this week, seeing how countries are preparing to address the NDCs next year for COP30, and the sheer difference between where they thought they were going to be in Paris and the likely outlooks for COP30 being as low as they're going to be. We'll see how that turns out.
Yeah, we will definitely see. Matthew, final remarks?
Yeah, absolutely. It like Rock said, it is kind of crazy that I'm here. There's so much to take in. I'm still processing it, but it is truly it's an honor and a privilege to be at this conference, regardless of the outcome. I still have pretty high hopes for it. There's still so much work being done, so many negotiations being worked out, and like I always keep stressing, there are so many just incredibly smart scientists and incredibly passionate activists that are meeting here, and they are networking with each other, and they're sharing research, and they're forming connections and things like that. And there is so much value that comes from just the whole community of climate involved people coming together at a conference. So much value in that, and it's important not to lose sight of that. If like me, you're just becoming more and more disappointed and frustrated with this political process of talking yourself up, and not making any real commitments. There is with all of the frustrating stuff, there is some seriously important science and activism going on this week, last week. And so just trying to keep your eyes on that, and I'll you know keep as many updates as I can on that, that darn political process. But even there, like Dana talked about, there's been some progress there. So it's not all bad. There's some really, really good things going on, even if some of the process is disappointing.
Awesome. And Dana, your closing remarks?
So, though, as I've understood and heard reiterated many times here, 1.5 is probably dead. We have probably just hitting it now, but we have to do everything we can to keep it within range without losing too much biodiversity, without losing too much life. The next few days, as Rock said, is going to be extremely important and very difficult in terms of financing what needs to be done in all of those nations who are producing the least carbon and who are most acutely affected by it. But it is inspiring to be here with so many activists, scientists, people from every sector, financiers, government officials, and with US government officials. The antidote to anxiety really is action, and hearing from our representatives, our advisors in the United States, understanding that it is not all lost, that we are mobilizing from below, that the train might have left the station already and it will not be stopped. We will get this under control. It's just a question of when.
Well, let's hope when is sooner than later. But to reiterate sort of what everyone said in a way is we're going to have to fight for this. If we want to save our planet, not our planet, our lives, if we want to save our lives and our lifestyle, we're all going to have to do something. So take a few moments to think about that, and let's make it happen, everybody. And we'll see you on Wednesday.